Welcome to the eCommerce Badassery podcast, the place for scrappy entrepreneurs who want to learn actionable steps and strategies to grow the traffic, sales, and profit in your e-commerce business. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster, a 20-year retail veteran and former brick-and-mortar boutique owner who spent 3 years as the only employee of a 7-figure online store. That shit was crazy. I know exactly how it feels to do all the things, and I'm sharing everything I learned the hard way so you don't have to. I may have started this business by accident, but supporting badass bosses like you lights me the fuck up, and I am so stoked to see you grow. Are you ready, babe? Let's roll. Welcome back to the eCommerce Badassery podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. This is week 2 of our Badass Basics series where we're breaking down the foundational stuff every e-commerce store needs to have in place, whether you're just getting started or you've been at this for years and possibly skipped a few steps along the way. Today, we're diving into your navigation menu and collection filters. The navigation menu is a super important element of an e-commerce website. Not only is it important for SEO, helping search engines understand the structure of your site and creating a bunch of internal links, it's also super important for your website visitors, and it works hand in hand with your collection filters. So I want you to think of your navigation menu and collection filters as the sales associate in a brick and mortar store. Now, anyone who has shopped IRL knows not all sales associates are created equal, right? A bad sales associate will stay silent, avoiding eye contact until you physically approach them and then give you vague directions. You end up wandering around, likely getting frustrated, and probably leaving without buying anything. A good sales associate will greet you, ask a few questions to identify what you're looking for, and then either walk you directly to the right area of the store, hand you off to another associate to take you there, or give you really clear directions on where to find what you came in for. Your navigation menu and collection filters are doing one of those two things right now. It's either guiding the website visitor to where they need to go, or it's making them work for it. If it's the latter, they're not contacting you to complain, they're just bouncing and going somewhere else. We want your navigation and filters to be the good sales associate. So let's talk about what that looks like. Before we get into all the details, I do want to touch on the question that comes up the most. What should be in your navigation menu versus your filters? And the truth is, they're mostly going to be the same. At the end of the day, there are multiple different paths people are going to take when shopping your site. Some will go straight to the navigation to dig deep into your sub-collections. Some will go direct to the parent category and narrow down from there. Others are going to go directly to the search bar. Our goal with navigation and filters is to serve everyone, regardless of the path they take or where they landed on our website first. That's why, in most cases, you're going to have a lot of repetition between your navigation and your filters, with some nuance depending on the product you sell and your specific assortment. While we can't cover every possible configuration, let's talk through a couple of obvious examples to illustrate what I'm talking about here. We'll use jewelry and apparel as examples. If you sell jewelry in both gold and silver, it would make perfect sense to have a sub-collection for each metal and a filter for both of them. So someone could go into the gold jewelry collection and filter by product type, say necklace, earring, ring. At the same time, they can go into your necklace category and then filter by metal, silver or gold. Apparel, on the other hand, while you definitely want a color filter so shoppers can narrow down each collection, you can bet I'm always filtering down to black. Would you have a sub-collection for each color of apparel you sell? Probably not, unless maybe you were White House Black Market. Do they still exist? And that is all you really sold. Again, there are a lot of nuances to this depending upon what you sell in your unique product assortment. But a good rule of thumb is, if I would make a collection for this, it should also be a filter. That rule doesn't quite apply perfectly in reverse, but it should get you 90% of the way. We're going to circle back to more specific filters in a bit, but I wanted to make sure to set that replication expectation. That sounded like a Big Bang Theory episode title. I wanted to make sure to set the replication expectation before we dove in. All right, so let's talk about how to organize your navigation. This comes down to two important elements. How does someone shop for the product that you sell, and what's most important to your business? So let's start at the top with your top level navigation. These are the links that are immediately visible in your navigation bar. And how you plan this is going to depend on the size of your product assortment. If you have a one product or one category store, you don't really need much up there. Your shop link, a quiz or product guide if you have one, and that's honestly about it. For a store like this, information-based links like about and contact can live in your top navigation without causing too much clutter, so you can put them up there if you want. If you have a wider product assortment, I want your top level items to be the main parent categories of what you sell. So jewelry would be necklaces, earrings, rings, bracelets. Apparel might be tops, bottoms, dresses. And once your navigation is doing that much work, information-based links about contact affiliates, those move to the footer. They don't need prime real estate when your customer is there to shop. The one exception is wholesale. If wholesale is a real revenue driver for your business, or it's something that you focus on heavily, you can leave that in your main header navigation. If you're an e-commerce store first and wholesale is just a side thing, footer only. You'll also want to include a new arrivals and or bestsellers, depending upon what you've got, but that's really it. Now, what if your product assortment doesn't fall into clean product type categories? I had a client who sells handmade keepsakes and gifts for kids, things like milestone cards that you use when you take pictures of newborns each month, personalized baby blankets, bookends, art display boards, memory books, very different product types that don't obviously group together. So instead of organizing by product type, we created what I'd call use case categories, which I honestly just tried to think of something for this podcast to explain this. So her top level categories are milestones, kids decor, and keepsakes and gifts. Milestone cards and baby blankets went under milestones. Bookends and art display boards, kids decor. Memory books, keepsakes and gifts. When product type doesn't give you a clean answer, think about what the customer is actually trying to do or celebrate and organize under that. Once you've got your top level sorted, the next question is what lives underneath them. These are your sub-collections. And those same two questions are going to come back into play. How does your customer shop and what is driving your business? For some stores, your sub-collections are straightforward product types. If you sell apparel by gender at the top, then under women's, you've got tops, bottoms, dresses, and so on. Clean and logical. But then you have to layer in the business strategy piece. When I had my brick and mortar boutique, denim was a huge revenue driver. So even though denim technically lives under bottoms, I'd be putting that into its own top level category. If someone's coming to me for denim, I don't want them to have to dig through bottoms to find it. I just want them to know, hey, here's our denim. For stores with a wider or more complex assortment, you could end up with 3 levels to your navigation menu. And sometimes that second level is really just an organizational heading that groups things visually. So I worked with a skincare client who has her own spa and an online store where she sells products. Under her top level skincare category, her second level items aren't actually shoppable collections. They are things like product type, specialty, and then grouped skin concerns. So appearance, acne, and texture. Those are not collections people shop. They're just a way to organize what's underneath them, making it easier for people to shop. So I'll drop a screenshot of how this looks in the show notes at ecommercebadassery.com/370 so you can see it visually. And then the last question to ask yourself about sub-collections, do you actually have enough product to justify it? A sub-collection with 2 or 3 products isn't helping anyone, it's just friction. So if the answer is no, keep it in a parent category and then let your filters do the work for you. One last thing to talk about in collections is named collections and seasonal categories. Named collections are great marketing tools. They work really well in emails, in ads, on social, but they don't always translate to navigation. If someone lands on your site for the first time and sees the Wanderer collection, they have no idea what's in there. So if you want to use named collections, you can, but make sure it's in addition to descriptive collections like we've been talking about. And then, of course, you have your seasonal and holiday collections, which you should absolutely add to your main navigation menu at appropriate times of the year. Just don't forget to remove them. Ultimately, your navigation menu is highly dependent on your product assortment, and the perfect navigation for one store is going to be different from the other, even if you sell similar products. My best recommendation is for you to grab a spreadsheet and just start jotting down every possible collection. Don't worry too much about the organization at this stage, just get them all out. Then you can go back to organize, refine, remove, etc. And the good news is it's not set in stone and you can always adjust if you need to as your business changes or as you learn more. All right, so let's get back to filters. As I mentioned earlier, if you're creating a collection for something, it's a pretty good sign that you probably need a filter for it. But what other filters should you consider that you wouldn't necessarily create a collection for? Now, what about a price filter? This one is a little bit unique. So if you have a wide assortment of the same type of product at different price points, then a price filter is important. Think about a retailer like Amazon. If I go looking for a pair of black stilettos, they're going to have styles that range from $30 to $1,000. At my previous day job, we had similar products in a price range of $30 to $200. In cases like that, you need a price filter. If all of your products are around the same price, or you only have one version of each type of product you sell, you can skip the price filter. Then we have color, scent, and flavor. This is an obvious one, but I didn't want to confuse you by not mentioning it. A few key things to keep in mind here is I generally will group these if when needed. So, for example, if you resell products from popular brands that have unique names for their colors, scents, or flavors, you want to keep the name that they use so the customer can recognize it is the right item. So let's pretend you sell flavored lip balms. You have one from brand A and they call it sweet strawberry, and then you have another one that's sour strawberry. Well, you want to group them all under a filter that's just called strawberry. You don't need an individual filter for every individual flavor. And when it comes to filters, you also want to consider how many of something you have. Let's stick with our flavored lip balm example. You might have one strawberry, one raspberry, and one orange. Instead of having individual filters for each flavor, just group them under fruit. The same goes for prints. If you have a handful of animal prints, maybe 2 leopard prints, a zebra print, and a snake print, just group them together under animal print versus each one individually. And then style. As we discussed earlier, if you broke something out into a sub-collection, let's say maxi dresses, you definitely want to have that as a filter. But sometimes a style filter is necessary even if you didn't make it a collection. A client I worked with sells embroidery kits with her hand-drawn designs on them. She has a lot of different SKUs, so we created a filter that grouped her different design styles under categories such as flora, fauna, winged creatures. It didn't really make sense to create collections for those, as the thing they're really buying is the embroidery kits, but it was definitely helpful to have them as filters once they got inside. All right, so as we talked about in the beginning, the goal of your navigation menu and filters is to act as an in-person sales associate. The only difference is we have to anticipate how the customer would shop versus being able to ask them questions when they walk in the door. Once you do that, just set up your navigation and filters to follow that likely path. If I haven't mentioned it already, make sure you are being clear over clever when it comes to naming those links. We want it to be super obvious to everyone what they're going to find when they click through, and it's also better for SEO. All right, friends, that's a wrap on this week's Badass Basics episode. Make sure you check the show notes for some visual examples of what we talked about today at ecommercebadassery.com/370, plus some additional resources. Have a kick-ass rest of your week, and I'll see you on the flip side, friend. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more about growing your e-commerce business, get started with my free resource library at ecommercebadassery.com/free stuff and get an invite to the Lounge, my e-commerce marketing membership. When you're ready for one-on-one support, apply to work with me at ecommercebadassery.com/apply. Before you go, would you do me a quick favor? Leave a rating and review and tap that follow button. This pushes me up the chart so I can support more scrappy e-commerce entrepreneurs just like you. I'm on a mission to reach as many as I can, and I could really use your help. Thanks so much in advance. Until next time, e-commerce friend, stay badass.